Добрий день.
Good morning. I want to thank everybody who joins us. Today is 21st of February, and my name is Olga Atamanova. And I greet everybody who joined Ukraine Media Center Ukrinform. It's almost 1 year of the full-scale aggression of the Russian invasion in our land. We will talk about regulatory policy. We will talk about how our business survived this year of full-scale invasion, how it transformed during the war, how it adapted, and about the role of the government in this process. I want to introduce our speakers today. They are Alexei Kucher, the head of State Regulatory Service of Ukraine, Andriy Dlikach, head of Advanter Group, the Center for Economic Recovery, and Mikhailo Lechenko, deputy head of the Center for Innovations Development Initiative for the Economic Recovery of Ukraine. I would like to start our conversation with you, Mr. Alexei. I would like to ask about the role of the state, what the state did to make this year of war realistic for the changes in our business so that our businesses survive this super difficult times that still last for all of us, for the Ukrainians, and about the moratorium for inspections, what's its condition. Good morning, dear colleagues. I appreciate this invitation. I want to thank everybody who follows this meeting of ours today, who is interested in regulatory policy, because it's very interesting. Really, there are very profound processes going on, which are not on the surface, and sometimes I really feel sad that not all of the businessmen understand what's going on. So with time, I call more and more for the businesses to get more interested, get more involved in the regulatory work. And the colleagues who attend this meeting today, they're here to have those businesses understand what the regulatory policy is. So going to Ukrinform today, I remember the 23rd of February last year, because my previous report was on the 23rd of February last year. We declared about our ambitious plans, but on the very next day, in fact, in a couple of hours, the full-scale invasion has begun. So it didn't happen so as we planned. As we were talking with my colleague, the war started right upon our report, but today we will report again, and hopefully the war will end this year. Well, basically regarding the report, we only have 1 hour, unfortunately, so I will try to report very quickly what was going on with the State Regulatory Service of Ukraine within this year. So we basically work in 3 areas. We do deregulation, monitoring and control, and licensing of the permit systems. So regulatory policy and the regulation. In year 2022, in execution of the resolution on creation of interagency group, we reviewed more than 2,500 local regulatory acts, 35% of which were cancelled or brought in compliance with the legislation. In year 2022, we identified 129 resolutions taken within compliance with the legislation. So for your understanding, the state regulators, 77% of them, they take resolutions which are beyond their authorizations, and with a view of decentralization, the local regulator is a key agency for setting the rules for local businesses. The service paid more attention to the tracking of reports this year. so that you understand, after we adopt a regulatory act, there is certain monitoring of this regulatory act in terms of its efficiency. It's a very interesting phase in regulatory policy, which is very interesting in fact, because in a view of monitoring of this or that regulatory act, us as the regulatory service of Ukraine, we may take a decision on cancellation of such act as inefficient. So this year, in year 2022, we worked through 444 monitoring reports. We have to know that in fact we were able to make the agencies catch up with us in a way that they create their reports not in a formal manner to avoid some formalism. They just write that there is an act operating and without any figures, and we returned a number of such studies to them. Upon the results of such works, we've taken a number of decisions on cancellation of certain acts. For example, the resolution on for the special communication service, the resolution was undertaken, it was forwarded to them, it was quite adequate. The management of the service took it with understanding that the act was inefficient, and they developed the amendments which would improve the regulatory environment. As to the analysis of regulatory influence, it's another important thing. ARV, everybody who is interested in regulatory policy, is a systemic document which is worked on before the adoption of a regulatory act, and I call all the businesses to pay attention to this document. It has a lot of figures in it. It's quite difficult to read, but so we do everything we can to improve this document, to facilitate the reading and understanding on it. So now there is a good trend. More than 90% of the analysis of the regulatory influence are in compliance with the law. Before, it was way worse. I mean, this percentage. So I think that this is the result of our systemic work, because there were many remarks sent to our regulators, and our remarks were noted. We want to note that we worked through 962 regulatory acts, which amount to 75% of the last year 21, due to reasons everybody understands, because there was less activity in the regulatory field, and some of the acts were adopted without our agreement. This is the procedure envisaged by the law during martial law, because the speed of undertaking resolutions is quite important during martial law. So in a view that we blocked a number of regulatory acts, and we have such rights, we can do it with regard to some ministries and agencies. The businesses have to pay attention to it. If there are any regulations being adopted and you see it will create more difficult environments, so please note it and let us know. So we saved more than 919 million hryvnias thanks to blocking of such acts, and 3.3 billion hryvnias were saved for businesses as a result. As to the coordination of the deregulation plan, there are 128 articles in it. We expedited the coordination 28%, the completion of the deregulation plan. We adopted there was a great work done. Almost half a year we were gathering proposals from the business, what they want to deregulate, what they want to include in the deregulation plan, and that plan was approved in January with the new terms already. It included 50 articles less than we proposed, but still I think that it will be a powerful step to deregulate the activity in a number of business areas. As to our proposals in the area of regulatory activity, we submitted the draft laws for the facilitation of a collection of taxes in the regions that law was adopted further on, and we had to do a hell of a job to investigate all the taxes and duties to in current conditions due to the internal displacement of a lot of individuals and businesses respectively. And during the martial law we decided that the taxes and levies should not be coordinated during the martial law. We also identified another regulatory act that stipulates that all the regulatory acts during the martial law should be adopted without agreement of the state regulatory service. I don't know how this initiative could be justified, and it's not about our entitlements, but it's just that the businesses would not be able to react. How justified such initiative is, there is no any explanation in the explanatory note, and I don't know what should be happening next after such resolutions would have been undertaken, and how they would work in the after-war life in Ukraine, and how the state regulatory service and businesses should react to this. Okay, let's go on. I would like to know that we gathered initiatives from on the post-war reconstruction. The state regulatory service was taking very active part in submission of those initiatives. We submitted more than 20 of them. I would not list all of them. You can get familiarized with them on our, and we work in that field. I will tell you about our prospects, the forecast of our work, our further plans. So the permit system, we initiated and developed a draft law which is currently in Verkhovna Rada on cancellation of the 20% of existing permits. Out of 85 documents listed in the document, 85 permits, we want to cancel 17 of them. There are certain expectations from eco activists, but I hope that this draft law will be promoted, and 20% of the excessive permits which were not in fact received by our business community, I don't know what do we keep them for. It can be called a regulatory garbage. So as to the improvement of the instruments of state regulation, I would like to stop here. It's a revolutionary breakthrough. Well, it can be a revolutionary breakthrough. It does not exist yet, I emphasize it, but in terms of the regulation, it can be very powerful. Those interested in regulatory policy, they've heard that there is the interagency working group on the review of the state regulation instruments, different licenses, nodes. So that working group reviews them, and we reviewed the environmental sphere and everything represented by Ministry of Economy. Now we're reviewing infrastructure and Ministry of Health. What I want to say is that we take a lot of efforts there. I want to thank USAID experts who were involved in this analysis. The work is huge. The tremendous work was done already. So if we do everything that we've thought, less than 40%, not less than 40% of permits were proposed for cancellation in all the spheres. So the number of forms and instruments was reduced to its passports, accreditation, certification. So it cannot be so that every step of the business just comes across an obstacle of the state regulation, which impedes the promotion of its business, of rapid decision making. I would like to note also that our expert council keeps working. You know that it's I apologize, but it's a very cool instrument for a businessman who is deprived of a license or influenced by a licensing body. So 40% of complaints, more than 50% of complaints were already satisfied. So every licensee who thought they were, so basically every other licensee who was thought to be affected by the activity of a regulatory service, their complaints were satisfied, and the licensing bodies, they address us with the request for extra scheduled inspections. We had 22 such applications, and we agreed for only 3 of such inspections. So in almost 100% of cases we refused to do it because we're understanding that businesses feel it difficult to work in conditions like this, and it's impossible to hear to someone else's questions. As to the moratory, just like you mentioned, I will give you some brief figures. I communicate a lot about those figures, though they are real vibrant. We have to pay attention to them. So in year 2022, we had more than 200,000 infections scheduled and extra scheduled. Starting from March, all the inspections were prohibited. As of today, this figure is less than 11,000. So the number of inspections in 2022 was 20 times less than in 21, and nothing terrible happened. Businesses were disturbed by the government 20 times less, and there was it resulted in no apocalypse, in no emergencies. It gives us opportunity to review our attitude to inspections of businesses. And in this context, I would like to say that we work on an option of a remote inspections. It's an innovation that we want to implement in view of restart of our information portal to reduce the actual contact between a government official and a businessman, so we could avoid corruption. And we come to a conclusion that this number of inspections is just unnecessary, and it results of a number of officials who are being sent for such inspections, first of all, and it reduces the government expenditures. We don't need them. And there is a concept that we introduced, like a remote inspection, and our businesses should end up in a different conditions now, just like the state itself. And there is a balance that I would like to pay attention to. All the time the government keeps asking, or they're calling to trust them, trust the officials, trust the government officials. I can agree as being a government official myself, but the government should learn to trust the businesses. The government should trust business. As to the inspections, we had 31 scheduled inspections, 16 by the government control, and 12 by permit system. And we made 14 protocols, drew up 14 protocols on business inspections. So in fact, we want actually to review the concept of the responsibility of a government official during inspection. And because today the situation is distorted, it's mirrored. There is a presumption of guilt of a businessman. Right away, when government official comes, it's been penalized. It's been penalized right away, and they have to pay right away. And if they don't agree, that they can protect themselves in the court. And me, as a or us as a regulatory service, when we inspect with that government official, we can only draw up the protocol for administrative violation, and it's then the court which comes up with an award and either accuse a government official or not. And it may result in a penalty of 225 hryvnias, for example, or like 340 hryvnias. So this balance should be eliminated further on. I already reported that we want to develop a restart. I'm not going to stop here. International cooperation. We reinforced our international cooperation. There was a very fruitful meeting with the Committee of the Regulatory Policy of USR in Paris in December last year. Two main things that I asked about during our meetings, that for us to become the fully associated member. I emphasized that we spend all the money on war, and I asked to support us financially to pay for this associated membership by them. It's a very powerful step because Russia's participation was suspended, and we will enter this this unity together in OECD. That's it will be a very costly inspection for us, 500 to 600,000 euro. The development of this policy for OECD, and it will be an important step in post-war reconstruction of our country. We also visited Poland, we visited Austria, and they do a great job. We advanced our joint collaboration with Poland. They are ready to take part in the operation of the office, which was created as a result of the acts ratified by the European Council, and I think we will see great advancements there. Going further, our transparency and publicity, what I would like to emphasize very briefly, we created a bot last year, a chatbot, support of the business during the war. I called it 3 Ps. It's like questions, notifications or reports, and proposals. So we've undertaken an undertaking to respond the questions in this chatbot within 24 hours. We had more than 300 applications. We reacted quite quickly. We called the businesses to address us. Your proposals sometimes are very important and interesting. After all, we act in the business portal. It's the online consultation. Our specialists want to help you. Please, dear businessmen, address us. There's a lot of applications on relocation of business, and 26% of such questions. About United Nations cooperation with that organization, we had a lot of issues worked through about the local governments. It enables them to produce the regulatory acts without mistakes and in a very rapid manner now. The priorities and aims for the year 2023. I will wrap up here. We've seen a lot of gaps in our legislation, and I call the business community to get involved in work on these gaps, and my colleagues too, those who have a lot of experience in the area of regulatory policy. We're about to present the draft law on coordination of three policies. It's very profound, more than 70 pages, and I invite everybody to analyze what we offer. It's about responsibility, and it's about understanding of a number of standards. Well, it will be interested in general. So this is one of the top priority areas for this to work this year. Well, penalties, I already reminded. We want to balance the penalties. It's very important. As to our electronic initiatives, digital initiatives, just in short, we want the regulatory portal. It will be a super resource, and it will be a breakthrough in the sphere of regulatory policy. Everything related to regulatory activities will be available there. We have more than 1700 regulators, and we don't understand who does what, and it's a huge problem for our business, and we want to create a platform to have the regulator cabinet available there, so that everybody can see what the regulator does from the very moment of adoption, and it can be influenced in a legal way. All the business processes can be influenced in a digital manner, through a digital way. So its conditional name is a licensing portal. We want to fill it with all the instruments to have them all in one place, and the inspection portal is the restart that I already reported on. So wrapping up, what I would like to say, we do all of it to bring our victory closer, and we think strategically on the quickest possible reestablishment of all the processes. We also cooperate with the volunteers. Why am I saying this? Because volunteers have a lot of problems now. We know it. All those problems, they are being solved in part. We see that the Minister of Digital Transformation and the Minister of Economy, they create groups. All of them get involved. They do a great job. We should thank them for that. But the problem, for example, that I faced, or we're facing now, is that the volunteers address us. They say, for example, we facilitated the import of night vision goggles or drones, but those are the double purpose goods in European Union, and to import a batch of such goods there, we have waited for 1 month or two, because volunteers said that they were let through easily, and now they're being held for a month or two, and it's a huge problem. I met a European Commissioner, Stefan Füle. It's a Czech politic. He's quite a powerful lobbyist of Ukrainian interests, and he promised me to expedite this issue, how it was, for example, solved with the body armor. It's a military equipment, and they were not led through in a quick manner, and then a duty was imposed to issue the permit within 2 days. And for our volunteers and people who work abroad, it would be way easier to send this type of products. So volunteers, please systematize your problem issues, and we will submit it to the Ministry of Defense, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and we will move it forward. Thank you, Mr. Alexei, for this profound report. Mr. Andriy, Mr. Mikhailo, you as a representatives of the civil community, I'm sure you feel it quite well, the sentiment of the business. You know the problems of the business which exist for the time being. I will not open, it won't be a mystery for anybody that without efficiently working business, there may be no conversation about any normal economy. So what are your conclusions after your studies? What are the problems of the business? What sentiments can you mention? And if we can, let's maybe stop on the tax policy, because we know that this area of government activity has more complaints from the business. Yes, you are quite right, but it's also the regulation which is one of the biggest problems from the point of view of the business. But what the regulator service does and other regulatory bodies of the government, it's not only the problem of the business, but the government actually accepts it as takes it with understanding, and business respects it. Mr. Alexei said that the government should learn how to trust business, and the business is ready to trust the government. And this is the process which is being evidenced by this study. The studies were not only done by the analytic centers and civil society, but they were done with the support of the Cabinet of Ministers, the Ministry of Digital Transformation, Ministry of Economy and Ministry of Finance, and other government institutions, and also the Business Community Coalition got involved, that I'm happy to be heading now. It includes 95 business associations, but their study was not going on inside the coalition. It was by the proper drawdown of all Ukrainian businesses. It was a 10th wave of studies since the beginning of the full-scale aggression, and we questioned 535 Ukrainian enterprises, and the results were as follows. We see that just like in spring last year, 90% of Ukrainian businesses help army. They implement humanitarian and volunteer programs. It's 90% of the business. At the same time, about 26% of Ukrainian enterprises don't work, almost didn't work as of the end of the year 2022. Imagine that even non-working, non-operating businesses, their owners, continue to implement humanitarian projects and to support the Ukrainian army. So 65% is the turnover figure comparing to the previous year. So it's a 36% of the fall of the business turnover, which correlates with the fall of Ukrainian GDP, 30%. And it was important for us to understand the dynamics. So if in if in March 85% of the businesses were stopped, in April that indicator fell to 55%, and it kept decreasing by the end of the year. That same 26% of the businesses which were remained stopped. So the business showed very high speed of renewal, high speed of relaunch. Those indicators are different in regions and in industries. There are more non-operating businesses in South and East. 60% of the businesses are suspended in the East, but there is also relocation. We analyzed that figure, and Mikhailo will tell more details about this. The forecast for the next year is 10% of the average indicator of growth. It's about, well, transforming them into GDP is +2, +3% of GDP growth. So the business is optimistic. They invest in the projects of the Ministry of Economy, but since now the forecasts are reviewed
for the worsening. We continue monitoring the situation, and we continue sending signals to the government what should be done for proper renewal. And the program of renewal of recovery presented in Lugano, and which was mentioned by Mr. Oleksiy, was not perceived good by the business. Many businesses took part in development of that plan, but that the plan is not perceived by the business for the time being as a positive plan, the one that could contain some positions such as liberal reforms, economic freedoms, and so on. So at 10 point score, the score will be 10-point scale, the score will be 4.8. And the most actual problem of the business is the underfinancing of the business. More than 600 billion hryvnias is the current need of the business, and within 3 years perspective the business will need $60 billion for implementation of their ideas. That money is not in the budget. There is this money, there is an amount in the banks, but they suspend lending now. So unavailability of grant programs, high taxes and levies, everything that washes out the financial resources from the business is being indicated as the problems of the business. And the lack of ability to forecast the actions of the government is the distrust in the government. What government should do is to stop reviewing everything, and what government should do is to create a normal deregulation policy. Talking about the direct problem of the cooperation with the government, we fully understand that within the last couple of months the biggest problems that overlaps everything is the blocking of tax invoices. That this problem was faced by 42% of the businesses now. So within the last 2 months their tax invoices were blocked. With our constant monitoring, the situation improves, however it remains still bad. What else? Logistics, 1/5 of the businessmen face it. The cancellation of booking, there is a new procedure, but it doesn't solve the situation in full. And there are inspections for 10% of the businesses. The inspections remain an important thing, and they are being used as an instrument of pressure rather than the logical objectivization of situations. So virtual inspections would be a great solution in my opinion. Almost 60% of the businesses haven't used a single instrument of government aid, and the main instrument was the tax reliefs and 579 lending, which is more actual for the agrarian enterprises rather than for the others. As to the power shutdowns, due to those events the businesses lost thirds of their turnover. So average loss is 32% of profit for the businesses. What are the key priorities for the businesses? Is the overcoming of corruption. We haven't been using that term within a couple of waves, but we were asked to add that term because the businesses, they care about corruption. We were understanding that it's a key priority for the business, but again, the overcoming of corruption is not being perceived by the business as a simple thing for a long time. They understand that corruption is just the expression. Is business involved in corruption? Because it would not have existed without business, because it's the way to solve the situation when other solutions are not available. When there is such a system of, for example, customs operation or government procurements or the acts of a monopoly committee, they all operate in such way that businesses cannot get either financing or a land plot for business. And this is why a part of the businesses, they resort to corruption. But the businesses who trust the government and they want the government to trust them, they are ready for a new social agreement. So give us financial resources, implement the tax reform that so much was said about, then implement the rule of law, the justice reform. So those are the reforms that are requested by the businesses so that we can enter into a new social agreement between the businesses and the government. Well, I won't stop here. You'll mention it. And respectively, what can it solve? It may give the business an opportunity to invest in the country, to invest about $60 billion. This is what business needs, but a lot of enterprises need from $50,000 to $100,000 for implementation of their projects. It's fully possible to implement in a horizontal law, and provided the change of a monetary policy in this state, when the banks will restart lending to the businesses, and the proper way is to retain the money with the business itself, and the blocking of the tax invoices and non-reimbursement of VAT only removed 200 billion hryvnias from the business, and the corruption rent is about 400 billion hryvnias. So the business requires 600 billion hryvnias, and the implementation of tax reform would increase the turnover 20%, and to increase the jobs 20%, to increase an amount of investment for 24%. So the answer is obvious. Just before the government implements it, the key indicator here is the indicator of activity, the aggregate activity of Ukrainian businesses that show their businesses' readiness to invest. Whether the business enters into new contracts, creates new jobs. So this is the indicator that shows what's going to happen to the economy within the next couple of months. If it's more than 50, it demonstrates the growth of economy. If it's below 50, it demonstrates the decrease of the business activities. Its relocation outside Ukraine. 8% of the added value was relocated outside the country during the last year, because the number of active companies in Ukraine decreased almost 100,000, and 30,000 Ukrainian companies were registered abroad. So the answers are obvious. Within the last 3 months, the business activity growth is negative. So the businesses received no normal signals from the government to keep growing. Thank you very much, dear colleagues. Thank you very much, Mr. Andriy. So the signals from our businesses are quite clear about the, and foreseeing the questions from our journalists. Where can this study be seen in more detail? I understand it's very profound, and the journalists will be very interested in reviewing it. And Mr. Andriy, about relocation and personnel and other things. Well, our technical team is loading another presentation, dear colleagues. Thank you once again for this opportunity. Thank you. Thanks for the state regulator service to be so that they make us able to report about our activities publicly. As Andriy Dligach mentioned, we will tell more about the initiative, and where you will be able to see our study in more detail. We don't open it in terms of disclose it from terms of figures, but we break it down by sectors and regions and so on. That initiative was founded with the Office of Development of the Businesses and Export after Kyiv region was liberated. We started pondering over the renewal, the recovery, and we have to study this area together with the stakeholders. And we use different systems for the drawdown, as Andrei mentioned, is the joint system of economic indicators. We do the drawdown by sectors of active businesses, and we emphasize the businesses who really operate in Ukraine and which generate the profits, which are exporters outside Ukraine, and the businesses which are involved in state procurements. And with those indicators, we create an online dashboard, a monthly online dashboard, where we see the registrations of new businesses. You see that there is a dynamic preserved in Ukraine comparing to COVID era of 2020. It's comparable to the martial law time, so the businesses react in the same way to either COVID or full-scale war going on in Ukraine. What should be emphasized is how the power grid operation and destruction of infrastructure influences the businesses. We've seen that registration of new businesses stopped in October, December, but we've got another 20,000 registrations in the month of January, which evidences the necessity to work in the area of the regulation. By regions, we can see that the most active are Kyiv, the city of Kyiv, Kyiv region, Lviv region, Dnipropetrovsk region, Odessa region. So I couldn't say that the businesses are relocated actively, but we understand that to create your own business, we use this phenomena, the place of registration rather than place of actual residence, and it distorts the details a little bit. We also studied in this question the business. We asked the businesses about their development plans. 44% of the businesses state that they adapted their strategies, and 44% of the businesses they turn to export, which is very good because they will receive foreign currency revenue, which will fill the state budget. And we also studied the indicators of by finance businesses need in financing by sectoral drawdown. Those are processing industries and not those who deal with the raw materials, and all that potential can be covered by state programs, for example 5, 6, 9, if it would be more accessible to the business. As to the amount of funding, we also mentioned the criteria that business comes across, how they see the payment of taxes in 2023. The business states it very well. If there is no external funding, we won't pay taxes because we will not just be able. If there is funding, we will pay just as much as we did during 2021 before the full-scale invasion. Those are the tremendous figures, and the Ministry of Economy should pay attention to that. As to the relocation, the businesses retain their dynamic with relocation. They don't expect any soon stabilization in the eastern part of Ukraine, so some of them plan to relocate abroad, but it's a minor fraction. Only 3% they do not know where, because it's a very important indicator because they don't know how the business will be stimulated by the government. Well, talking by the industry and regional breakdowns, the most demand are IT sector, sport, processing industry, not related to light industry or construction, and professional services. We see this sector, and It's not only eastern part of Ukraine who is looking for relocation. A lot of businesses do know where to relocate. It's a signal to the government, but the western part of Ukraine also don't know whether they need to relocate, and they relocate if they do. The problems that were mentioned comparing to our study back in November, January, we see some movements. The businesses started to trust the government a little bit more. This percentage grew a little bit, and the businesses, they decreased their grant programs, demand the government keeps working on them. And as to the operation of the fiscal bodies, that indicator keeps falling, and the biggest indicator that remains and keeps growing is the payment capacity of the clients. So it's pretty complicated due to the reduction of the scale of the services provided. And the business gives its signals as to the non-transparent environment in Ukraine. It's a very important indicator. The businesses started trusting the government, but they don't understand how it will evolve. As to the personnel, we started studying it from the June, and we see that the trend is stable. The personnel is being cut, and those waves were more active in June. We understand why it happened. A lot of people changed their place of residence. This trend is still going on. There are 18% of the people who still feel it, even in terms of salary cut. As to the number of personnel, 50% of the businesses are up to 5 persons. We don't know why businesses responded, so we will have to ask it from them in the further study. But 50% of the businesses did not hire any new employees since 24th of February last year. It should be developed in terms of a creation of new jobs and development of economy in total. The number of new employees and how the number of employees the businesses got involved. Some of the businesses really feel deficit of the qualified personnel. It's a big indicator and good indicator for business, because there is routine work, but for some businesses the new employees are needed to create new products and develop the economy. If we check for the ways how the new personnel are being searched, 32% look by themselves. It's very interesting. There is a labor market which is not yet stabilized. There is no single instrument, but the state employment service, they keep working on it, and they have a first pilot in terms of creating their first labor portal, where all the employees can see the vacancies from different businesses in different resources. So 90% of the businesses, they had an experience of cooperation with state labor service, and a lot of other businesses, they use different other resources. And very important indicators that we started studying from the point of view of how military administrations cooperate with the businesses. The local governments, they produce some interesting local programs for involvement of businesses, but as we see, 89% or like 81% of the businesses, they don't understand that such programs are available by the local governments. It's critical, because the businesses or the local governments should be open to businesses. This should stimulate the cooperation to develop the businesses. So 15% of such
businesses use such services by the military administrations, and not only military administrations, which is not quite bad. But do the businesses take part in those programs? I mean, among those who are aware of such programs, so it's only 5%, almost 6% took part in such programs, and 86% are not really interested in such programs by the local governments. They don't take part in them. And now let's proceed to the changes of regulatory environment. We do such studies. In the last study, we've seen that the indicators were a little bit more interesting from the point of view of the fact that the businesses did not understand what regulatory environment is. Now those indicators moved in other direction. Businesses started looking at regulatory services. They say those are the positive changes in regulatory environment. It was 29, now it's 26. The indicator keeps growing. It's quite positive. We will continue following it in our further studies. And as to the deregulation of the business activities, what can we say? The businesses emphasize a lot. 71% say that it's not enough. They would like the regulation policy to be implemented on the wider scale. The state regulatory service should continue their work. They should cooperate more. Yeah, this question should be addressed with them. So as to the changes into economic activity, the colleagues asked this question from the business, and they said that 91% didn't have to change their economic activity type. So the businesses did not change a lot, and it did not create any additional load on different licensing agencies, licensing and regulatory bodies. The problems with the licenses is the very important question in terms of matters that we studied. In the last study, the businesses said that the review of the document takes a lot of time. Now it's now there are high requirements to the material base. The businesses, they review their policies in terms of how things should be happening. What's more interesting is that the businesses keep saying that 21.8% they said that the licensing documentation cannot be obtained without mediation. So it should be a very clear indicator for the necessity of digital transformation in terms of extension of licenses. If we say about the problems with the absence of the access to the information in open registers, well, first of all, not all of the businesses are subject to licenses, but again, 11% said that it's impossible to check the partners' licenses. It's a key thing for operation of electronic registers. They're not open enough, they're not transparent for creating communication and partnership in the business. And about the inspections, as a main type of inspections are on-spot inspections. Last time 79% of the businesses said that they supported. Now 82% of such businesses state that they supported. So it's a good indicator in terms of businesses' readiness to cooperate with the government. So they don't want to have that official coming to their place and doing what they do. And the last thing that we see, that the businesses don't fully understand the legislation during the martial law, what inspection can be going on during the martial law. We know that the state labor service doesn't do it anymore, but 18% say, and that the local governments by registration, again 18%,
and local governments in terms of activities. So those are the main indicators that are the violations of business rights during martial law. So thank you. If anybody has any hypothesis, please go ahead. Mr. Mikhailov, thank you. We've just received a huge massive of information. Unfortunately, our time expires, but let's take some questions from the floor if there are any. Dear colleagues, please go ahead. Well, we have no questions on the floor, so I think that we have to take a little bit of time to think through this information. Visiting us today were Alexei Kucher, Mikhailo Dlikach, and Andrei Dlikach and Mikhailo Lechenko. We're being inspired to see the cooperation between civil sector and the government. It's always a step ahead, and that will result in better efficiency, in growing efficiency. Thank you for the interest in this topic. We continue working on our victory, trust in our armed forces, and glory to Ukraine.